Hello everybody and welcome back to Mentors. Today we are continuing our interview with Arie Brish. Last we left off, we were discussing a company's ecosystem and the powerful influence of emotions. Let's jump back in. I've read a book really recently about how emotional decisions, and there's always a lot of subconscious things in the background that do influence people. So it's always interesting to know that even in the B2B world, emotions very much exist. And as much as it's logical and robust and industrious, there are still people behind it. And talking about people tend to fail all the time, and that's how we learn. And you've been able to mentor many young people, many startups, many businesses and companies, and you've had great success with it. What is some of your most frequent advice to young startups?
That's a big question, a short question, but a big one. So from the way you kind of started the question is about failure.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to phrase it, accept failure as part of the success. Does it make sense?
Absolutely.
So, for example, one of the first things a founder of a startup needs to do is to raise money to fund that new business. And by the way, let me dial back a little bit. People perceive the word startup as mostly technology, but in many cases, the new idea can be not necessarily some rocket science technology invention. It can be new service, new way to approach the market. Uber, for example, they did not invent any new technology. They put together different technologies to come up with a new service. When you wait for a taxi, you wait half an hour. When you wait for Uber, you wait for 5 minutes. So, boom, that's where they are. They did not invent GPS. They did not invent internet. They did not invent, electronic credit cards, everything. They just put together existing technologies to create or to offer a new service to the market. My favorite example of being successful with old technology is Domino Pizza. Domino Pizza went public about the same time as Google. The Domino's stock did 2 times better than Google. So Google is perceived to be, the darling of Silicon Valley. Domino Pizza did 2 times better. So if you invested $1 in Domino Pizza back in the days and $1 in Google, the Domino Pizza shares did 2x better. So going back to your question, one of the first thing any new business needs to do, unless you're wealthy from the beginning, is raise money. Even when you're wealthy from the beginning, you still need some outside money. You don't want to put all your life saving in one venture. So you need to raise money, and that's a long, frustrating journey, the fundraising for a new business. And the rule of thumb is you'll probably get 1 to 10. So you'll get 10 no's before you get 1 yes. So the philosophy, the mindset you need to be is the more no's I get, the closer I get to the yes. Okay, so don't be discouraged by people telling you that they're not going to invest in your new business. People have different reasons. It doesn't mean that your idea is bad. It means that your idea doesn't match that investor's priority at the time. And the investors have different priorities. It could be they look at opportunities from geography. They invest only in Philadelphia, or they invest only in Dallas. They look at different industries. They believe that only artificial intelligence is good, or they invest only in real estate, or they invest only in new restaurants, or whatever their investment theme, it's called, is. And then sometimes they have conflict of interest if they invested in another company in your, maybe a competitor, or if they invested in another company in the same ecosystem. They don't want to invest in another company in the same ecosystem because it puts too many eggs in one basket, so too much risk for them. So there's different considerations. You can have the greatest idea in the world, and an investor will still say no because of all the other different considerations I mentioned. And sometimes they just don't like your idea. That's okay too. But you have to keep going until you find the one that will fall in love with your idea. And the other thing, by the way, when they tell you no, in many cases they tell you why they declined your new idea or new business plan. And by listening to the reasoning of why they declined, you learn how to improve your story. So next time you pitch to another investor, you do a better job in the pitching, and modified your business plan or your PowerPoint. So every no also improve your pitching, or your presentation, or your business plan. So that's another, by the way, one more comment on this question. A good strategy is to maybe pitch your new business at the beginning to 2 or 3 friendly, so-called friendly investors, just for the purpose to get their feedback on your business plan or on your pitching. Sometimes you will know maybe they're not going to invest. You know that before you even walk into the room, because it doesn't fit their investment theme. But if they are friendly investors, somebody, a good friend or uncle or family member or whatever, they will give you the feedback. So sometimes strange investors may not take the time to give you feedback, or may not be, or will be too polite to give you an honest feedback. Somebody, a good friend, will open up and give you an honest feedback, even if they don't like what you're pitching. But that's a good practice for the new entrepreneur.
Absolutely. I find it really, really interesting that, you can just keep going, keep failing, and keep trying, especially in terms of pitches. When it comes to building that idea, building that startup, how have you found, with the companies that you've mentored, how have you found these young startups breaking the norm in order to get a competitive advantage? What is the best way to look at the industry, look at the field or the ecosystem that you're in, and say, you know what, I want to switch things up, I want to change the game, and I want to pursue something a little more crazy, but I feel like I am reassured by the fact that, like, it is a competitive advantage and I can get on top.
Yeah, excellent question. So, excuse me. Again, back to the book. One of the chapters is called "Being Different is Better Than Being Better." I have many startups that come for my help, say, "Okay, I'm 30% better than my competitor," and normally that's not a good story, because you're competing against an existing incumbent. And by the way, the competitor, by the time you come out with a new product, your competitor will be 30% better as well. So you'll be 2 years later, you'll be competing at the same level. So being better is not good enough. Unless you are 10 times better, that's a different story. Being different is a safer way in some extent. Sometimes it adds it's riskier. There is more risk in being different because you're the first one that pave the way to this new crazy idea. I'll give you an example. By the way, the book has tons of very old examples. Like I'm talking about 100 years old, 200 years old, because it takes time to learn from a success or failure only, so many years later. So take, for example, the invention, let's say the invention of the telephone. That's one of the examples I'm talking about. We talked about ecosystem. So when Alexander Graham Bell, who is credited for the invention of the telephone, which, by the way, he's not the real, or there were other people that developed telephones at the time. He was the first to be able to secure the patent because he had more money to pay his intellectual property lawyer, and his intellectual property lawyer had connections at the US patent office at the time. So Graham Bell is known for inventing the telephone just because he had more money to pay the lawyers. So that's something not very well known. So, but when he invented the telephone, there are two things. Okay, first of all, it's something we talked about ecosystem. For example, that's a perfect example or a good example of developing the ecosystem. So to be able to use the telephone, you need all the infrastructure of the telephone lines to connect all the houses and all the offices, which did not exist at the time. So you would ask yourself, okay, what is it good for? I cannot connect it to anything, so I cannot talk to these remote people. So his first I would say market segment was for people normally in downtowns. At the old days, downtowns, people had their shops at the first floor and then their apartment at the second floor of the same building. So it's mom and pop shops with the owners of the business lived on the second floor. The business was on the first floor. So the first application of the telephone is communicating between it's more like an intercom thing. So communicating between the second floor and the first floor, where people, it's the same family. So the person in the store says, "Oh, I have too many people. Come down and help me out. I need the help." Or I'm going out for lunch or whatever. This was the first communication, just because there was lack of infrastructure, and that was the only quick way to get the communication. So this is an example of something at the time was a crazy idea, but when it's so crazy that people don't know how to digest it, or the infrastructure is not ready, you have to find a niche application that will get you started. Another example is the invention of the airplane. So the Wright brothers had the first flight in 1903 or something. And once again, the penetration was too slow to support their business. So they were at least smart enough to understand that something so new, governments will be the first customers. So because it was so new, therefore so expensive, therefore the only people that have this kind of money were the governments. So they started to negotiate with the US government and the French government at the time. But governments are normally slow, and the negotiation took too long, and they needed some short-term money to feed the new business. So they had to look for some short-term applications. So one short-term application they found was flying schools. People did not have money to buy airplanes, and the commercial industry or commercial flying industry did not exist at the time. But people were enthusiastic enough to say, "Oh, this is something cool. I'll go to school and learn how to fly." So the early money they made was just selling the flying lessons services, and that was the quick money. The other quick money they had was flying shows. So they had different acrobats, chaining themselves to the airplane and doing all kinds of crazy things in the air, and people paid to come and watch these shows. So these are the two immediate money makers for them, short term, to get some cash into the business. So that's two lesson learned of, if you come out with something too crazy that will take too long to educate the market and get the infrastructure to accept it, or the infrastructure that is needed to do that, find some applications that will give you some short-term cash so you can let it take off.
Absolutely. And in these examples that you gave, you need to be you got to be a really intelligent founder or CEO. Just make sure you can navigate those waters. What are some of the best qualities in excellent CEOs in all your years of building, researching, and mentoring? Mm-hmm. What have you found to be excellent qualities of CEOs?
Okay. There are two questions here, even though you didn't think about it. There's two questions. So when you start a business, the founder is the CEO, right? So in order to found a new business, you need to kind of have an open mind to think about, okay, what is something crazy nobody else is doing? Because if you start another fast food restaurant across the street from McDonald's, even if your food is better or whatever, it's that will not justify a new booming business. Maybe even a recipe for failure. So one thing is to be able to think out of the box. And as we said at the beginning, most young people think out of the box because they don't have a box.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's a starting point there. The second thing is be aware. So once you kick off your new idea, be aware that you need help in commercializing it. And we said the help could come from 2 or 3 different ways. One is get some mentorships from experienced people. Another one is to hire experienced people to work for you. So that's definitely second advice. The third one is just take a checklist, like the free download from my website. Take it, download it, and go item by item, and make sure you have a plan, or at least you think about or develop a plan for each one of these checklist items. Because it's like a complex machine. If one little component doesn't work, the entire machine will collapse. So you need to make sure you pay attention to all these details and have some kind of a plan. My favorite quotation is by Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett said once, an genius without an idiot with a plan will outperform a genius without a plan. So you really need to make a plan. It could be not perfect, but at least you think about it, and if there is something too unknown in the checklist, go and spend a few hours and research it. It doesn't take too long. So within few days or a few weeks, you can come up with reasonable answers to all the items in the checklist, and you can start from there.
Absolutely. I think those are some great beginning qualities. Those are the great top beginning qualities for young CEOs, especially. Just make sure you know to be excellent. You have that plan. You're determined. I love that quote as well. Being an idiot and having a plan, you'll be more successful. That's phenomenal. Unfortunately, we're running out of time.
Okay.
But I would love to know where can the audience find you? Where can they read your book? Where could they come and talk to you?
Okay, so my website is www.cxo360.net.
Mm-hmm.
The book, once again, is called Lay an Egg and Make Chicken Soup. It's available on Amazon, available on Barnes & Noble, available on Books and Million. Almost every small stores will have it on, at least in their list of books. It may not be on the shelf every place, but on Amazon for sure you can get it. And my website has all the contact information. Once again, www.cxo360.net.
Well, Arie, thank you so much for being on. It's been nothing more than a pleasure.
Thank you, Eva. I was honored and pleasured and enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this interview series. I would love to know some of your best takeaways. You can find me easily on LinkedIn or Instagram just by searching Eva Wetrick, and I'll happily get back to you and have a conversation. If you really enjoyed this episode, please feel free to leave a rating in iTunes. That act will compound in ways that I can't even imagine. As you have just found a mentor here, go out into the world and see who you can be a mentor to today.